Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, and having had the chance to work as a counselor and as a therapist over the last few years, I today wish to talk about certain aspects that came into my periphery as I went into listening and maybe to some degree understanding about the recent case of Siya Ketan and Chetan that has made state level and national headlines. Now, let me begin by saying that the killing of a certain person or the murder of a certain person under no circumstances can be justified unless probably it happens out of self-defense. And that too, that's my personal perspective on that. And we all have the right to choose to agree or choose to disagree with that thought. And yet, however the court of law decides to take a stance on this, decides to give its judgment on this, there are certain things that got revealed through this entire case, or many more such cases that have happened not just recently, but historically as well, or at least in the human history as well. And when I'm talking of history, I'm talking about all of our collective stories from the past up till the present. So the first aspect that got reflected to me was the lack of communication, or humans having communication problems. Well, weirdly enough, we are the only species that can talk through our bodies, which is called as body language. That can talk through making sounds just like most animals do, and that has also invented language through the usage of words, or at least most people. And yet, we have communication problems. And yet, we fail miserably at communication, in communicating ourselves. And when I talk of communication, it involves speaking, hearing, and listening. And it also involves taking in the grasp of the context with regards to the content that is being delivered. And to play it out very simply as to how effectively do we communicate, I have asked this question multiple times to a lot of people, and at times the same people over and over again, that if you've watched the movie PK, what exactly do you notice towards the end? What exactly do you listen to as to why aliens had come back to Earth? What was the purpose? What was their intention to come back to Earth? And almost 99%, close to 100%, I'd even say, a lot of people give me answers with regards to understanding humans, understanding religion, and some just stay blank. Now, when I further give them hints, yes, correct, they've come to understand humans, but in what context, in which ways they've come to understand humans, many of them stay clueless. And that, in a way, tells us how bad, how messed up we are in communications, because none of us hear and none of us listen, or at least most of us, that the aliens had come to Earth to understand our language and why it's so messed up. Why what we think, what we say, and what we do are so misaligned, are so incongruent, are so in disharmony with each other that we essentially are not in harmony with ourselves and in our relationships as well. And then we wonder why our relationships are not harmonious. Because with regards to this particular case, everybody or most people are saying that she should have clearly communicated whatever her things were to her parents. Had she done that, had she had the courage to do that, somebody probably would not have died. A life could have been saved. And yes, that's true, that's agreeable. But then that's also a point. If that's the trigger that most of us have, well, it's a great opportunity as a trigger to reflect. Within our own families, within our closest relationships, What essentially are the things that we are not communicating, that we don't have the courage to communicate, to speak out, and to even listen, and which we think, if we do share, if we do communicate, if we do listen to, will break the status quo, will break the framework of our relationships? Because, in my understanding, every trigger, which essentially is from the outside, every stimulus from the outside that triggers a reaction, is essentially acting as a catalyst to ignite something, to burn something, because within us lies something that gets ignited, that gets burned, that gets churned, that gets triggered because of an outside stimulus. And thereby we can take it as a greatest opportunity to learn on very personal levels, which this case is clearly telling us as to where do we not have the courage in ourselves to communicate the things within our closest relationships that we've actually been wanting to communicate, that actually we need to communicate, but have not been able to do so. And quite naturally, it also tells us that if we've not have the courage to communicate what we essentially need to communicate, what we should communicate, what we've been wanting to communicate, what are the fears that are holding us back? And the fear very likely is about losing something. And maybe then it's about asking, do I have the ability to handle this loss, to bear this loss, to carry this loss, to grieve this loss? Or do I not have the ability to handle this loss, to carry this loss, to bear this loss, and to grieve this loss? In case if I do communicate something or some things. And weirdly enough, this communication thing or the issues with regards to communication was also delivered through two movies. One was Dil Dhadakne Do, wherein a dog's character, as one of the essential characters in the movie, is also saying as to why humans do not communicate exactly what they feel, what they think, and what's in their mouth. Why is their thought, their feelings, their words, and their actions not in alignment? Why do they keep beating around the bush and going round and round the bush rather than delivering it directly and, of course, kindly as well? It was also expressed through the movie Cocktail 1, wherein Saif Ali Khan's character tells Diana that whatever is happening, whatever has happened between us, let's just sit around a table and let's just tell Deepika's character, Veronica, about it. Let's just sit down like grown ups and let's have a roundtable conference about it and handle it like most mature people would handle it. Next, it also tells me that when we do not have the vocabulary and the emotional capacity to communicate what we feel, what we think, both speak and listen, we also lack emotional intelligence. We also lack emotional maturity. Because when we do not know how to communicate effectively what we think, what we feel, what we wish to speak, it also then should make us reflect that most of us have been trained and taught on what to think rather than how to think. And what to think is primarily all about how to be good boys and good girls, which is taught right from our families, from our communities, from our social networks, from our society, from our schools, and from our religion. But not making us how to think robs us of our ability to even think about our thinking, which is called as metacognition. And they say that metacognition is one of the highest forms of intelligence. And in a way, what we essentially are saying is that we lack communication intelligence, that we lack emotional intelligence, which is whereby we lack relational intelligence, and we lack in metacognitive intelligence as well. Now, I'd like to add something with regards to emotional and relational intelligence as well, that many a times, or way too many times, when we do not embrace or when we do not accept our negative emotions, but are rather too busy running away from them, avoiding them, escaping from them, which nature has inherently provided to all species, not just humans, and which forms probably more than 50% of our emotions. Which then converts as feelings and sensations in our bodies. And when we are busy running away from them, escaping them, avoiding them, we literally cannot understand more than half of the emotions and feelings and sensations that are happening within us. Quite naturally, we lack emotional intelligence. Quite naturally, then we also lack relational intelligence, personally, on a very personal level, and on interpersonal relationships as well. And many a times, when we've spent our lives running away, avoiding certain parts of us or certain emotions that nature has inherently provided, We fail to understand our own emotions. When we do not understand our own emotions, when we cannot sit even with our own emotions, especially the so-called negative ones, which feels hard, we find it difficult to have hard conversations. And when we cannot have hard conversations, we once again miserably fail in emotional and relational intelligence. And when we fail in understanding our own emotions, because more than 50% of them are the so called negative ones, the hard ones, the tough ones to deal with, to sit with, how can we make somebody else understand the same? How can we communicate the same to others who also probably lack in similar ways like we do, lack the same emotional intelligence, lack the same emotional maturity that we do. And then we expect ourselves to behave in mature ways within relationships. Well, that should actually make us scratch our heads and say, you want to get the PhD, you want to get mastery over your emotions. You want to understand your emotions. You actually even want to communicate. But you've attended only half the class or less than half the class. And you've only attended the class when it came to all emotions that were pleasant or so-called positive emotions. But you did not attend 60 to 70% of the class where other emotions were being discussed. So how do you get the PhD over there? How do you understand your emotions? How do you master your emotions? And then how do you expect yourself and somebody else to have an emotionally mature relationship? That should make us scratch our heads to have such twisted kind of thinking. Now over here, what I've also realized is that many a times, or at least in this video, I've used the word understand a lot many times, or at least a few times up till now. And the Hindi meaning of the word understand or understanding is samajhdari, is also bujna, is also bodh hona, is also saf, clarity. And if we understand all of those words, samajhdari, how can we develop samajhdari when we've not taken the full course on emotions and thereby emotional regulation as well, and thereby addressing emotions in relationships as well? How can we talk about bodh, किसी चीज का बोध होना, because bodh in a way also connects with bodhisattva. And how many of us can truly claim that we are really samajhdar when it comes to emotions, when it comes to relationships? How many of us can truly claim that we are bodhisattvas when it comes to emotions, all emotions, when it comes to relationship and emotions within relationships? I'm pretty sure that if most of us honestly have that dialogue with ourselves, we'll get an honest answer for ourselves. And maybe if the honest answer is, I'm not sure, and maybe I need to look into that, maybe we actually need to look into it. And if the answer is a sure shot no, that no, I cannot consider myself to be really samajhdar when it comes to emotions and emotional intelligence and maturity, or that I can call myself a bodhisattva when it comes to emotions and emotional intelligence and emotional maturity and relational intelligence as well, we definitely need to look in over there, unless we fear that emotions are going to eat us up, especially the hard ones, the so-called negative ones, if we understand them, if we feel them, if we sit with them. Now, when that is not in place, when that is not aligned, any time that we wish to have hard conversations, we deal with them as if we are in a war-like, a combat-like situation, wherein we attack, we defend, we deflect, we hide, we escape, or we avoid. And with that expression within our closest relationships, we either come out feeling like a victor or a victim. And when conversations feel like wars, or at least hard conversations feel like war, how do we feel safe, physically safe, emotionally safe, mentally safe within our relationships? And when we do not feel safe, quite naturally, we cannot trust. When we cannot trust, we do not feel empowered. And when we do not feel empowered, we naturally lack the courage to even face our fears. For any kind of a battleground is wanting to protect and preserve ourselves first. And if our conversations or the hard conversations feel like that to us or to a lot many of us, then we've not been able to communicate what we wanted to communicate, what we need to communicate. There's a lot of fear riding inside of us. There's a lot of fear residing inside of us, which needs to be looked at, which needs to be addressed. Else our relationships and our equations with our relationships with ourselves and with others will almost always be compromised, will almost always be inauthentic, will almost always feel like a cage and not freedom. Now, this case also tells me that if she was not able to have this hard conversation with her parents, that she could not tell her parents that she did not want to marry or did not want to marry this particular person or whatever the situation might have been, it also makes me assume, it also makes me think, to speculate. If she saw within her parents' relationship and with her relationship with her parents how hard conversations do take place, because we all learn how to communicate, starting from our families first, from our extended families and neighbors next, from our society next, from our school next, from our organizations next, and from our religions as well. So my best case and worst case assumption is that probably, to a large degree, she did not see effective communication, impactful communication happening between the grown-ups in the family, whoever were the grown-ups within this family, direct or extended ones. She did not see, she did not learn how to have hard conversations, how to even resolve conflicts or interests that were different from each other through conversations held in mature, responsible ways. When she didn't learn it, she couldn't implement it as well. Because in my understanding, there's barely anyone who would not like to communicate, authentically communicate, truly communicate, honestly communicate what they are feeling and what they are thinking. Unless, of course, they are psychopaths. And then too, if she was a psychopath, the worst case assumption that I can make, or she is a psychopath, is even then, she should not have been forced into marriage, but rather a better alternative would have been to opt out of marriage and maybe give a chance towards counseling and therapy, or maybe even some psychiatric treatments if possible. But marriage should not have been an option if we were even making the worst case assumption that she is a psychopath. For that's a much more immature decision. That's a much more dangerous decision to make than not making that decision at all. And then even that should make us reflect. If she assumedly is a psychopath and she is 20 years of age today, it's not possible for her caretakers, for her caregivers, right from home, to her neighbors, to her extended families, to her teachers, to some of her friends, to not notice some kind of a deviation in behavior in keeping with her thoughts that would have shocked, that would have raised eyebrows, at least within some people. Somebody in 20 years would have noticed such kind of a deviance with regards to thoughts, with regards to emotions, with regards to feelings, with regards to empathy or no empathy, and with regards to behavior and actions. And if they did not, well, either they were not engaged with her, emotionally engaged with her, or they did not pay attention to her, meaning they were not attentive towards her, or really did not give enough caretaking to her, because caretaking does not happen without consistent attunement, attention, and affection. And maybe most people, as her caregivers, from within her home, to her extended family, to her neighbors, to her friends, and even to the teachers in school, were either physically and or emotionally absent. Physically and emotionally neglectful. For a mature person, if dealing with a psychopath who's turned 20 within this year itself, would not want to tie up their psychopathic kid with somebody else in a matrimonial arrangement, in a matrimonial, in a marital relationship. Next, it also reveals to me that we are more shocked because it's a girl who committed this crime. It's a woman who committed this crime. Because through centuries, these kind of hideous crimes have been committed against other humans in the name of female infanticide, in the name of dowry. Just like the Twisha Sharma case, which happened very recently, in the name of family's honor or keeping family's honor safe, which is called as honor killing. But because we have normalized all of these other atrocities, all of these other aspects, and because we've become insensitive to them because they've been happening for so many centuries together, a girl or a woman now doing it is more shocking. Which is where we are today saying that even men are today afraid to get married. And when we put it like this, that even men are today afraid to get married, it in a way subtly implies that probably women were always afraid to get married, to leave their homes, to go into unknown places and spaces, to live with the fear of all of these kinds of atrocities if it could happen with them. But it was never paid attention to. It was brushed aside, it was avoided. And once again, reiterating, whatever we try to escape or whatever we try to avoid, we never learn anything from it. And when we do not learn anything from it, we do not understand it. And without understanding, समझदारी और बोध कभी नहीं आता. Now over here, once again, I'd like to say that that's not justifying her actions if she committed them. And that's not also justifying any human's actions, be it a man or a woman, if they choose to do that, if they behave like that. Another thing which also gets highlighted here or gets revealed over here through this case is that India, being a collective and a patriarchal society for most parts, prefers group identity, prefers group decision making over individuals' preference, unlike individualistic societies. Many a times within such communities or collectivistic structures, many times a lot of things gets pushed aside, gets brushed aside, gets repressed and suppressed because we do not want to destabilize the established status quo. We want to have a superficial kind of harmony so as to not rock the boat, so as to not rock the family dynamics, which is then we begin to play in very people pleasing, in very passive aggressive ways. But it's just a fact that in our society, in our community, as within many other communities which are collectivist by nature, the group always gets a bigger preference over the individual. The group's choice matters more than the individual's choice. because then it can be treated as an act of rebellion. Then it can be about losing our face, losing our name, or feeling ashamed or embarrassed in front of the society. And in order to avoid all of those feelings, we withhold ourselves back. And that might be helpful in certain situations. But many a times it also makes the person feel irrelevant, unnoticed, unheard, unseen, unrecognized, or under-recognized. Now, since our structure is like this, built essentially to not rock the boat, to not move the boat, to prioritize stability, it kind of neglects the satisfactory aspect of relationships. For even today, even when we say that divorces are rising in India, it is still 1% of the population, or even less than that, that chooses to discontinue with a certain type of relationship, with a certain kind of family dynamics. But for a larger chunk of us, almost 99% of us, we still believe, we still function on maintaining stability. And if we were to ask that question to a lot of people, are you truly satisfied in your marriage, in your relationships, within your family equations, however the family equations are? Well, the statistics also tell us that more than 50% of the people who have reportedly claimed to not have been satisfied in their closest relationships, in their marital relationships, in their familial relationships. And maybe there are many more who have not reported to that fact. For if it was not the case, the gradual rising cases of divorce and the cases of cheating and matrimonial affairs would not have happened in the first place itself. Also, there's a huge stigma still attached to divorce, or even the notion of divorce, both on the personal level and on the family level as well. Within our extended families, within our society, and within our nation, for it is perceived like a failure. And in our own belief systems, any kind of a failure is met with shame. And since shame is one of the hardest emotions to deal with, to feel, to process, we still prefer to turn a blind eye to many of things that actually needs to be addressed within ourselves and within our interpersonal relations, within our marital relationships, so that it helps us grow out of it rather than keeping us stuck in it. So maybe the next question to ask is, what do I need to communicate to the other person or to other people to gain both satisfaction and stability? What do I fear will happen if I communicate my dissatisfaction? What do I fear will happen if I address me feeling disconnected within this relationship? For I want both connection and stability. For I want both satisfaction and stability. And without me communicating that, it's never going to be addressed. And if it's never going to be addressed, it's never going to be met, at least within the context of this relationship, which leaves me feeling unfulfilled, dissatisfied, and to a large degree, even unhappy. And if you're okay with that, well, then there's no problem at all. But if you're not, what fears will we need to face in order to gather the courage to be able to address them, to be able to communicate them, to be able to speak them, and even listen to them if somebody else communicates that to us? Next, it also reveals to us that we as a society are still in a lot of rush, at least for most of us, to get our kids married. For if we look at this case, this girl, Siya, aged 20, her boyfriend, aged 22, and her fiance, aged 26, are all in their 20s and mid-20s. And today, when science is telling us that our prefrontal cortex, PFC, does not develop fully and completely till our mid-20s to our early 30s, so on an average up till the age of 28 or 30, in a more broader generic term, Why are we wanting to get our kids married so soon when they are still immature, where their PFC, prefrontal cortex, has not yet fully developed? For it is this part of the brain which develops, which completes its formation so much later in life, which is responsible for long-term decision making, for impulse control and regulation, for emotional regulation. Why are we pushing our youngsters, even today, to get married so early when that part of the brain is not yet fully developed? And unfortunately, and very insensitively, and even I would like to say nonsensically, we then expect them to behave in very mature ways when their PFC, prefrontal cortex, is not yet fully formed. And in my understanding, on a societal level, that's a very immature way of functioning. That's like expecting a 2 or a 3-year-old to drive a car very well on the roads, taking full accountability and responsibility of not just one's own vehicles, but their own bodies, of their own emotions, of the world that is moving outside of them, and of the traffic rules and regulations as well. Well, maybe that's expecting a little too much. That's having unrealistic expectations. And unrealistic expectations, in my understanding, causes a lot of resentment, a lot of disappointment, and a lot of sadness, which can very well be seen through this case. Next, it also makes me think that if it was an alliance of convenience for financial business or for any other kind of social status upheaval, which could have happened because of this alliance, in my understanding, personally, this could have been done in other ways as well. For at one point in time, and even today, most arranged marriages are alliances in some form or the other, are in agreement in some form or the other. But we need to be very aware as to what kind of agreements are we making. Who will be the caretaker, and on whose shoulders would that agreement rest? Are those shoulders capable enough of shouldering that alliance through this partnership? And if not, can those two be kept separately and addressed separately without them merging into one? For a very, very long time back, when marriages essentially came into the picture, where kids got married at the age of 9, 10, 11, 12, 16, or even 17, 18, where most marriages were arranged marriages, were arrangements within families of families. They were essentially done keeping all of the other arrangements, all of the other agreements in place. It was more about the families coming together and less about the two people getting together. And maybe we need to have a little more clarity whether it's in keeping with the two individuals who are coming together or between two families who are coming together as to what kind of alliance, as to what kind of agreements is being made. And is everybody mutually aligned with it, or does somebody else have a different say in it? And maybe if somebody else has a different say in it, that needs to be addressed, that needs to be taken care of till everybody is mutually aligned. Next, in my personal perspective, this case also brings to light that human beings, like many other animals, are essentially short-sighted. We truly cannot really think ahead in time. We do not really have the foresight to understand what's going to happen 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 years down the line in keeping with the actions that we are taking today. Which reminds me of this beautiful saying, of this beautiful quote: the solutions of today becomes the problems of tomorrow. So whether it is Siya or whether we consider anybody who cheats in the examination or cheats anywhere else or even tries to cheat themselves by deluding themselves out of reality, or whether it's a thief or a burglar, we all naturally take into account the risk factors, at least to some degree. We all try to make our plans as foolproof as we possibly can. Even a thief tries to do that. Even a student or any person giving an examination and wanting to cheat or attempting to cheat tries to do that, tries to make things as foolproof as they possibly can. And yet, Even when we do that, since 95 to 97% of us is operating from our subconscious, which is naturally out of our conscious awareness, which naturally implies that it's out of our sight. We naturally have the tendency. Quite logically, it tells us that it's in our blind sight, which we cannot see, which we overlook. And it is these little things that we overlook, that we've not foolproofed, are the ones that leads a trail towards its origin, which unfortunately or fortunately is us. And to me, all of these aspects came into light, came into my periphery, which I personally think needs to be addressed both on individual and on societal, on collective level, on systemic level as well. Once again, it does not excuse her actions, but it excuses nobody's actions, be it a man, woman, or any other gender that one chooses to identify themselves with, who intentionally, who knowingly causes such atrocities. But it also calls upon us to do our own work with regards on emotional intelligence and emotional maturity, on relational intelligence and relational maturity, on addressing our fears and even having the courage, developing the courage to address our fears, on understanding marital stability with satisfaction alongside each other, our honor in keeping with our family and our society and the pressures that we feel because of it, whether it is with regards to stifling down our voices, to brushing aside our voices, to not addressing our concerns, or whether it's with regards to honor killing as well, in order to keep the honor of the family, of the community. And lastly, but most importantly, our communication problems. Because if an alien through the movie PK and if a dog through the movie Dil Dhadakne Do are telling us that our feelings, our thoughts, our words, and our actions are incongruent, are not aligned, are not in harmony, we really need to pay attention to that. We really need to think as to what am I so scared of? What will I lose if I communicate what I feel, what I think? What will I lose if my feelings, if my thoughts, if my words, and if my actions are all aligned? Until we do not address those fears, we'll keep running away from our emotions, barely understanding them, barely articulating them. And without understanding, without that samaj, we quite naturally cannot act like samajhdar people, like mature and wise people. Without that being incongruence, in integrity, in harmony, we'll not find harmony within ourselves and within our relationships. So let's try and take the effort to do the internal work. And let's take a moment to appreciate the triggers, because they quite literally tell us that if it is getting triggered from inside, if it is triggering something inside of you, there is quite naturally something inside of you that has not been addressed, that has stayed suppressed and repressed, and that now needs to be looked into, that now needs to be addressed, that now needs to be acknowledged. Because unless we do that, we'll keep playing the similar cycles over and over again. So let's take this personally and collectively to look within. And I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And in case you wish to share your point of view, your opinion, your thoughts with regards to this contextual content, please feel free to drop a comment. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for giving me the time to watch this video, to watch this content. And please feel free to like, share, and subscribe if you do like the contextual content of these videos. Thank you.